All managers want to have the most talented players at their clubs, but they're also looking for the right characters. Just look at someone like James Milner, the ultra-professional, who will knuckle down and give his all, regardless of circumstance, rotation, or the position he's played in. Today's video is all about the anti-James Milners, the trouble causers, disruptors, and occasional criminals that no one wants in their dressing room. Thanks to Freemantle85 for suggesting this one, which I thought would be a good laugh, so I've given it a go. I asked you all for your suggestions on Twitter over at HITC Sevens, so the video is a combination of my own thoughts and some of your suggestions. One thing I'll note before I start is that players who like to throw their toys out of the pram and cause trouble generally tend to be more attack-minded flat players. So whilst I like to think I'm renowned for creating balanced and functional fictional 11s on this channel, today's video is an exception. The formation is a mess, the players are all over the shop, and the examples get worse the further through the 11 we go. But I guess that makes sense for an already incredibly dysfunctional team. For clarity, this is an 11 solely of currently active players, no retirees. Here is my hard to manage 11. Goalkeeper, Kepa Arrizabalaga. They say you have to be mad to be a goalkeeper, and there have certainly been some pretty mental ones over the years. Carlos Roa would have to be a decent candidate once upon a time, since who wants to be the manager whose number one decides to retire because he thinks the world is about to end? 20 years on, from Roa's apocalyptic predictions though, my choice between the sticks is Kepa Arrizabalaga. Suggested by a few people on Twitter, I think the reason for Kepa's inclusion is pretty obvious, but for anyone who's been living under a rock for the last couple of years, the Chelsea goalkeeper famously, or infamously, refused to be substituted in the 2019 EFL Cup final. Player power is pretty immense in the modern game, but it's still pretty rare to see a player undermine their manager that emphatically. The Spaniard is lucky he isn't managed by Sir Alex, who'd have given him a Beckham-style boot to the face in the dressing room. All things considered, the keeper who decides you're no longer his manager has to start. Right back, Serge Aurier. I told you the formation was a complete catastrophe, and I wasn't exaggerating. On the right of a truly dreadful back three, playing as either a right-sided centre-back or as an inverted right-back, is Tottenham defender Serge Aurier. Now, I don't think Serge Aurier would be as difficult to manage these days as he once was, but there were a flurry of calls for him to be included on Twitter, and I'm not exactly blessed with as many tantrum-throwing prima donnas in defence as I am in midfield and attack. Aurier was very highly rated following an excellent final season at Toulouse, but he failed to really kick on and become a top-class fullback at PSG. From Didier Drogba to Kolo Touré, many of those who have shared a dressing room with Aurier point to a lack of maturity and discipline as one of his biggest problems, and many managers have tried and failed to both tame and get the best out of the Ivorian. Centre-back, David Luiz. By my count, David Luiz was the most suggested player in response to my tweet about players who are difficult to manage, leaving me with little choice but to include him. Now, I think this might be a little bit reactionary given his shambolic cameo appearance upon the Premier League's return against Man City, in which Luiz was essentially at fault for both goals and sent off. Now, I don't believe that Luiz is renowned as being a bad egg or someone who causes upset within a dressing room, quite the opposite in fact, but I can still see why it'd be hard to manage. The challenge with Luiz, of course, will be trying to keep up his discipline and concentration, instilling some degree of consistency in him, and trying to correct his wretched decision making, particularly in costly areas. On the bright side, he probably played his best football under Antonio Conte in a back three, so maybe he'd flourish in this side. Somehow, I doubt it. Left back, Hamza Mendel. The least well-known player in this 11 I suspect, just given the demographic of our audience, Hamza Mendel is probably actually the hardest defender to manage in this side. Aged 22, Mendel came through the youth ranks as a promising prospect at Lille, and he was snapped up by Schalke for more than £5 million following just 13 Ligue 1 appearances. Mendel's time in the Bundesliga hasn't been a smooth ride though. Following the sacking of manager Domenico Tedesco in March 2019, Mendel repeatedly turned up late for training, he was dropped to the club's under-23 squad due to his ill discipline and sent out on loan to Dijon in France. Mendel is only 22 and has admitted that he didn't conduct himself well at Schalke, and he is impressed since returning to Ligue 1. But for now, he has a bad reputation that earns him a spot as our resident left-back come centre-back in this unorthodox 3-3-2-2/3-5-2 thing. Central midfield, Hatem Ben Arfa. I said this team had no balance, and if you needed any more evidence of that fact, I give you Hatem Ben Arfa as a central midfielder. Whilst I'm aware that my colleague over on HITC Sport requires a new pair of underwear every time he thinks about the former Newcastle United man, the truth is that Hatem Ben Arfa's career has been one big waste of potential. I once interviewed a footballer who came through the youth ranks at Lyon with Ben Arfa, and he told me everyone there was sure that Ben Arfa would go on to win a Ballon d'Or. Well, he hasn't, he's never come close, and he never will. Despite being supremely talented, Ben Arfa is about as hard-working and emotionally balanced as the average teenager crying over how the Mercedes their mum and dad just bought them isn't an AMG on my Super Sweet 16. We had the misfortune of having Ben Arfa on loan at Hull City for half a season, a loan spell which ended after Ben Arfa was subbed off before half-time, having covered less ground than our goalkeeper against Manchester United. Maybe the most talented man in this 11, but an absolute nightmare to manage, or even just to watch from afar. Central midfield. Adel Taarabt. Can you imagine trying to coach a team with Adel Taarabt and Hatem Ben Arfa in it? The club data analysis would think the wearable tech was broken when it said they'd covered 35 metres across 90 minutes between them. Adel Taarabt is a man who has a big reputation off the back of a single season at Queen's Park Rangers. A very good season in which he was the best player in the Championship, I will admit, but Patrick Bamford had a single season in which he was excellent in the Championship, and I think we can all agree that he is about as talented and likeable as one of the Kardashians. Following his one good season, Taarabt had 8 seasons of tantrums, ill-discipline, and wasted potential. That was, up until this season, in which the Moroccan has mounted a comeback at Benfica as a combative and talented holding midfielder. Unusually then, Taarabt is one of the only players in this 11 who is actually playing in the right position and has enjoyed any kind of good form this season, but he's still one of football's most famous whingers and a sure starter for me. Central midfield. Ravel Morrison. A midfield three of Ben Arfa, Taarabt and Ravel Morrison is enough to send most managers to an early grave. Trying to keep on top of these three would send you from 2004 Mourinho to 2020 Mourinho in the space of a week, and there's a decent chance all three would refuse to play the following weekend. Football fans in England know all about Ravel Morrison's early promise at Manchester United and some of his very briefly realised promise at West Ham United. Morrison, there is good reason to believe, was capable of becoming the best English footballer of a generation, were not for a string of off-field incidents that translated to poor form on the pitch or just no game time at all. Morrison is now contracted to Sheffield United, but on loan at Middlesbrough, and if Chris Wilder can't get a tune out of him, then Morrison's probably in trouble. Right wing. Emre Moore. Not as high profile here in the UK as some of those who preceded him, since he has never played here, Emre Moore was actually the first name on my team sheet. There is perhaps no more disruptive, ill-disciplined, and nightmarish footballer to try and manage than Emre Moore. Born in Denmark to Turkish parents, Moore was considered something of a wonder kid at Nordsjælland. Nicknamed the Turkish Messi, Moore was signed by Borussia Dortmund at the age of 18, but after a single season in Dortmund, the club decided he wasn't the type of character that they wanted around the place, despite his many talents. Moore moved on to Celta Vigo, where further question marks about his attitude were raised, and loan moves to Galatasaray and Olympiacos have followed. Left wing. Marko Arnautovic. Can you imagine trying to manage Marko Arnautovic? Coming into work every morning to find another transfer request on your desk. Marco, we only signed you a week ago. Yes, boss, but my brother says I can earn an extra tenner a minute in Mozambique. Ah, classic Marco. Coming and going as he pleases. Kissing the badge before kicking out when he isn't sold, all in the space of a few days. What a character. Arnautovic is a very good player, and he was arguably Stoke and West Ham's star man before forcing both clubs to sell him. With all the egos in this dressing room, the last thing you need is old Marco demanding a move every waking minute, so he comes in on the left. Centre forward, Mario Balotelli. You all knew Mario Balotelli would feature in this 11, and sure enough, here he is. Balotelli has forever been a nightmare to manage, from his off-field antics to his lacklustre approach to training. You know it's bad when you have to teach your star centre forward how to put a bib on. Even Roberto Mancini, who has come the closest to taming the Italian marksman in terms of his wayward ways, could only get mixed results. We all know Balotelli has the talent to hit 20 goals in any of Europe's top 5 leagues, but he just cannot seem to mature and find consistent form. Aged 29, he's still causing havoc wherever he goes, even disrupting what was supposed to be a fairy tale return at Brescia this season. Centre forward, Niall Ranger. Picture the scene. Newly appointed as manager of Nightmarish 11, you and the new squad turn up for your first day of pre-season training. Hamza Mendel arrived 3 hours late, Marko Arnautovic has left you a farewell note, Mario Balotelli's burnt down the clubhouse by setting off fireworks in there, Adel Taarabt has turned up 8 stone overweight, and Kepa's trying to dictate all the training regimes and who the club should sign in the transfer market. The last thing you need, if we're honest, is an Al Ranger turning up with an AK-47 and demanding that you give him your wallet. Yes, that's right, finishing off our Hatem Manage 11 is the man who launched the True Geordie's budding YouTube career. Nile Ranger is a man with more criminal charges than career league goals, who has been out of contract since 2018, and the only club who might give him a 77th chance is probably this one. So that's my impossible to manage 11. I'm sure you'll agree, it would be a complete disaster class trying to coach and control this lot, but let us know your extra suggestions down in the comments. In charge of the team would have to be Joey Barton, who'd have headbutted Ravel Morrison and threatened Sergio Aurier with a baseball bat before a ball had been kicked. Honourable mentions go to the likes of Nicolas Bentner, Granit Xhaka, Ricardo Quaresma, Alfredo Morelos, and possibly the most unfortunate, or fortunate man to miss out, Saido Berahino. As always, thank you all for watching, smash that like button with such venom that you need a new phone, tablet or keyboard if you enjoyed this video, and as always do make sure that you are subscribed to the world famous HITC Sevens.